So Courtney, what a great opportunity we have to do a couple different things as we sit down together. One is to talk about your journey, and the reason we're sitting down there and talking about it is because you're at the next phase, right? So you're at the next phase of your journey. Courtney has decided to transition out of leading the Cafe of Hope and move on to something else in her life. And so this video is an opportunity to say thank you for 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of service, and 10 years of allowing God to work not only through you, but allowing God to work inside of the Cafe of Hope to do what the cafe was designed for, and that was to create hope in the lives of people. So I want to take an opportunity to just kind of go and let the church know about your journey. I always thought it was interesting every time I'd walk in here and see you leading the cafes to think back to you were one of the first people to come to Life Church when we planted in 2004. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, how'd you end up at Life Church, and then how did you end up working at the cafe before you ended up taking it over and running it?
So how I ended up at Life Church, I got a postcard in the mail. And we were already looking for a church, so we were church shopping and just dropping into random churches. And so already looking, and got this postcard and was like, oh, this is brand new, let's go try this out. So that's what brought us here, and then we just stayed ever since.
Was there anything specific that you're like, when you came, you're like, oh, this is a church for us? Was there something that in your mind stuck out?
Everything felt right. There wasn't any part of it that I didn't like, I didn't feel out of place. Nothing was awkward. Nothing was, what's the word for when, rituals, there was nothing like that. It felt genuine, it felt real, and yeah.
So one of the dreams of the church from the beginning was to do business for mission. So we always said, if we're gonna come over here and we're gonna plant a church, we don't want the building to just sit idle. The building's 60,000 square feet. So we're saying, we want to start a business, and inside of starting that business, we want to do a couple different things. One, we want the building to be used by the community. We want it to essentially be a community center. We want our business to be able to create relationship opportunities. So we want whatever business that we start to create relationship opportunities. And then we want the business to make money so that we can give money away. So the church decided that we were going to start a cafe because we thought a cafe was a great way to do that. And we came up with the name Cafe of Hope with the idea that if we do provide those things, whether it's financial assistance or whether or not it's people coming in and using the rooms or having meetings here, or whether it was through relationships with the people that were working here, that we provide hope into a community that we felt like desperately needed hope. So we started the Cafe of Hope. We hired a guy to run it, and when we first got it up and going, is that when you came on as a part of the staff?
Well, that story starts with me getting to a place in school where I needed to do an internship at a nonprofit organization. So I was thinking through, like, what places do I care about, what really speaks to me, and I just thought, what better place than my own church? And so we sat down and talked, and I just said to you, I want to do an internship as a grant writer. Do we have one of those? And you said, yeah, we actually just hired one. And so I don't know if I knew it at the time, but I think that's God's timing. We couldn't have planned it that way if we wanted to. Just seemed like the right thing at the right time. So that's where I really started. And by the time that was finished, I think we were ready to transition to, we need a new leader.
Yeah, so you kind of came in a rough transition time of the cafe. So we hired a guy, and essentially it didn't work out. A lot of people don't know the story, but the guy that we hired helped himself to part of the money of the Cafe of Hope, led us to the decision of, we have to decide if we can even keep it open, because it was quite a bit of money. The transition of it all wasn't working. It was a new business, and then to lose that capital and be trying to build the business at the same time. And so we as a church were saying, you know what, we're not sure if we can keep this open, but we believe in the mission. And kind of interesting, then we come to you and say, hey, Courtnie, guess what? Like, you get to take over the Cafe of Hope. Now, it's a little bit of a financial problem, and we're trying to build a business, and we just fired the guy that's going to lead it. What do you think about taking that leap of faith and, stepping out and taking over the leadership of the Cafe of Hope? So what was that like at that time for you to process that decision, and what led you to the place where taking over the Cafe of Hope made sense?
I felt really confident about it at the time, but in hindsight, I had no idea what I was getting into. But I don't regret any of it. It was just a big learning curve. A lot of things that I thought I knew, but you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. And it was a big leap of faith for you, right? Because
Yes.
again, you're talking about taking over something that you've never done.
Yes.
Right. But at the end of the day, I think I remember this conversation. It's just like, but I can learn on the way, confident enough.
Yes.
I can learn on the way. And I believe in the mission and vision. I do believe that this can bring hope into a community.
Yes,
so I'm
but-
willing to take a big leap of faith.
Yes, God had to prove that to me along the way, though. Like, I knew that. I knew that was the idea. I heard you say that, but it had to be proven to me multiple times, when God would always give us exactly what we need. And I just had to see him do it to believe that the whole concept is God ordained.
It's kind of interesting how that process works, right? So this is the way God, I think, works with all of us. He puts you at a crossroads, and he gives you a promise and says, you know what, I am going to take care of you. But he really can't take care of you until you take the leap of faith.
Yeah.
And that's really what you're saying.
Yes.
Like, you came to the crossroads and you said, I believe. But God couldn't show himself until you put yourself in a position for him to be able to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so by you taking that step, you gave him the opportunity to show that he is faithful. And there have been many instances, been with us for 10 years. There's been many instances that I think that you can come back to and say, yeah, God was in that moment, and God was in that moment, and God was in that moment. Do you have any specifics, whether it's relationships or just generalities, like this is where God showed up in the midst of these 10 years, where we can see that God is faithful? And what did it mean to your own faith, and what did it mean to the people that were seeing it around you?
People, as far as employees, I've seen a couple different examples. There's two easy examples that comes to mind, but the one I want to talk about is Jenny, who's taking over. And I mean, to me, just the funny part of Jenny's story is if you hear my side of it and then you hear her side of it. So when we first met, she agreed to come in and do this interview, and I walked away from it knowing that she was the next thing. She was the next person that I definitely was gonna hire her. God brought her here, I had no doubt. I just overwhelmingly knew that. But if you would have talked to her right afterwards, she was reluctant, to say the least. She was in a place where I don't have to have a job, and I don't necessarily want a job, but this is where I'm at. And to go from there to where she is now, taking it over, is a story in itself. I love that story, and I can't wait for her to share that sometime. But also other employees that have worked here that, for whatever reason, I've just felt God, I wanted them here, and I knew he did. And so different people that I asked for a year straight, when are you gonna apply? When are you gonna apply? I wanna hire you, I know I want you here. And it led to them building relationships within the church and becoming baptized here. And that's where it started, is at that counter. And then customers as well, that same story. They come here because it's a place to sit down and a place to talk. And then they realize there's more. And then I see them on Sunday mornings. And that's one of the nice things about working on Sunday mornings. That's the only way you make that connection. You see those people. And I've only known them from the cafe, and here they are on Sunday morning.
Yeah. And again, you've obviously led a lot of my kids because they've worked here for you. And, one of the great things about that is to be able to know that and trust that the person that's leading them is a person that cares about them, and a person that not only cares about them as an employee, but cares about them as a person, and helps instill in them, how can you work and incorporate faith, right? And it's important, all my kids got to see that in firsthand, because it's a hard thing for people, right? To believe that your job is a place that you can have a testimony without giving a testimony, right? Like how you serve people and how you take care of people, the love of Christ, just by being a good employee. And so that's been a great thing for us to be able to watch, inside of that that journey. And so now you're at this place. Over the past 10 years, you've seen God do amazing things, right? And now you get to the next hardest place. God wants to move you on. Because to a certain extent, you have become pretty comfortable with leading the cafe, right? Like everybody knows you. Everybody that walks in recognizes if it's the Cafe of Hope, it's Courtnie. And then you get to this place where God starts to mix it up a little bit inside of you. Like there's some unrest. Maybe I should do something different. So let's talk through that, because I think that's a pivotal part of a lot of people's journey. Like you take this big step of faith and you live in it for a while and you get comfortable inside of it, and then all of a sudden...
And you love it, so why leave?
Right.
That was a really hard thing to process and just come to terms with. And so it took me some time to realize that it might be time for me to move on and explore something different. And in doing that, then I forced myself to, why is it so hard? Why am I afraid to leave? And realizing that I had really intertwined my identity in Christ with working here, and I was just afraid that if I didn't have one, I wouldn't have the other. But I went to God with that literally and was like, this is my fear, this is what I'm afraid of. And heard very clearly, I'm not leaving, I'll be there even if you choose the wrong job to go to, I'm still gonna be there, I'm still not leaving. And so then I was able to have a lot of peace with where I was at, which was that it was time to move on.
Okay, so now you're at this place where you've kind of released it. Like now you're at this next, God's causing me to be a little bit uncomfortable. It's kind of the next, phase of your life and the things that you're doing. And so what should people learn from that? And I think that's really an important part, because you get to that place where you've walked in faith for a while and then God stirs something up again. And so by you being through it and then getting to the other side, like you got to the other side where you finally had to say, okay, I'm going to make this decision and go there. For people that are struggling in the same place, what should they do, or what should they learn from your experience to help them through that same journey?
I can only speak for me, but for me it was to be honest with yourself and to be honest with God, because He can handle it. And if encouragement is what you need, then that's what He'll give you. If, He's had me doing this thing where I'm addressing fears, and that's been a weird thing, because I don't think I'm a fearful person, and I don't think I'm an anxious person. But if I have a question in my mind and my answer is, this is my fear, or what I'm afraid of is whatever, then I'm addressing that, I'm dealing with it. And so that was part of this, like just realizing that I had a fear that my faith could backslide if I didn't work here. It's not tied to this building, it's not tied to the staff, it's between me and God, and encouragement was what I needed. And so I would say to just be honest with yourself. That's a hard thing to admit. I don't want to say that I'm afraid of that, but that was the reality.
Well, Courtnie, obviously, it's been an incredible journey, and I think this is what we want everybody to know. Courtnie's not leaving Life Church, and Courtnie's not, moving to another state. She's just moving on to another job. And this was an opportunity for you to share your story, and I know through your story, many people are going to be able to connect the dots on how they can take their faith to another level. And we, as a staff and as a church, just want to say thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for everything that you've poured into the people over the last 10 years. And more than that, even that, thank you for taking steps of faith, even when faith is uncomfortable. And even when, for us, we'll miss you, right? Like, we're going to miss seeing you every day. We're going to miss walking in and seeing a familiar face. But at the end of the day, the greatest thing that we could ever do, the greatest gift, is that we can teach people that being comfortable isn't the end-all to faith, but being faithful is the end-all to faith. And your example shows to all of us that following the leading of God, even when it's uncomfortable, is far better than being in a place of comfortability and not being able to take those steps of faith. So we just want to say thank you for everything that you've done. And again, if you see Courtnie on a Sunday morning, make sure that you encourage her, say hi to her, thank her for her service, but thank you for everything that you've done.